Every professional, I think, has faced this dilemma, right? You're in your job, marketing, engineering, whatever, and you have to make a choice. Do you just, you know, grab the standard checklist, the best practice that everyone says you should use?
Or do you actually look at the situation in front of you and realize, wait a second, if I follow this rule book, I'm going to completely sink the project?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that conflict between conformity and context. You've got the rules on one side, and then the cold, hard reality of the numbers on the other.
And that conflict is never more expensive. I mean, the stakes are never higher than in these super regulated, really high-cost fields like specialized digital advertising.
Okay, so let's unpack this with a perfect, almost stressful example. Today we're doing a deep dive into this really fascinating, high-tension internal debate inside a marketing agency.
Right. They were running Google search campaigns for a mental health clinic in Manhattan. It was called Tribeca Medical.
And our mission here is to really get inside that conflict. We want to understand how applying these standard advertising rules, which are normally good advice, actually became a huge high-risk liability in this one specific case.
And this isn't just about, clicks and numbers. We're talking about expensive, very sensitive medical treatments, things like TMS, Spravato, SGB, all being advertised in one of the most competitive search markets on the planet.
And here's the kicker. The reason the standard playbook failed, it really boils down to two huge constraints the client had. And you have to hold both of these in your head at the same time.
Right.
First, a tiny, and I mean tiny, micro budget. And second, a massive regulatory weakness.
Okay.
They didn't have the critical LegitScript certification.
And that certification piece, I mean, that is the entire foundation of the risk here. In a market like Manhattan, the cost per click, just what you pay for one person to click your ad, it's already astronomical.
Yeah.
So you combine those crazy high costs with really strict compliance rules for treatments that are, for mood disorders or complex pain. And suddenly, just being good at Google Ads is not enough. You have to adapt. It's the only way to, to stay in business and not get your account shut down.
So this whole case is a perfect storm. It's what happens when the strategy gets totally disconnected from the math and the regulations.
Exactly.
So let's put ourselves in the shoes of the guy building the account, Lance Smith. Because the situation he was facing was, well, it was brutal. Let's start with the budget. What was he actually working with for these campaigns?
The total budget for all three campaigns together was just $1,500 a month.
$1,500. That's nothing in that market.
It's a rounding error for some of the bigger clinics they were up against. I mean, literally.
And if you break that down to a daily number, which is what really matters.
That's where it gets really stark. We're talking about $17 total per day.
$17 across 3 campaigns.
And Smith, he knew the market. He knew the CPCs in New York for these kinds of medical searches. So he projected that $17 would get him maybe 6 clicks a day.
Just 6 clicks to get all your data, test all your messages, everything.
6 clicks, while your competitors are maybe getting 50 or 100 on just one of their campaigns.
Yeah.
It's just not a fair fight.
It's budget starvation is what it is. You can't get any meaningful data from that. But that was only like half the problem.
Right. Then you layer on the regulatory factor.
The LegitScript certification, or the lack of it. Can you explain what LegitScript actually is and why not having it is basically an account death sentence?
Absolutely. So think of LegitScript as this crucial layer of compliance enforcement for platforms like Google, Meta, Microsoft. They vet businesses in these really high-risk industries, like addiction treatment or certain medical services.
So it's kind of like a seal of approval.
It's a seal of approval, but it's also a massive regulatory shield. When you're certified, you're telling the platform, hey, we've been audited, we follow the rules. Okay, without that shield, the account is it's incredibly vulnerable. Google has these automated policy bots that are scanning ad copy 24/7 for red flags.
Right. Trigger words and things like that.
Exactly. And if you're not certified, you are a prime, undefended target. A bot can flag your ads, suspend your account, and there's often zero human oversight. It just happens.
So with this tiny budget and this huge regulatory risk, Lance Smith comes up with a strategy, a plan based purely on context. He calls it the lean build.
And this lean approach, it just completely flew in the face of all the standard advice.
What did he propose?
He wanted to launch with only 5 very carefully written headlines and absolutely zero extra assets, no callouts, no snippets, none of that stuff the platforms always push you to add.
And his reasoning for only 5 headlines instead of the recommended 10 or more.
Yeah.
It was all about the math, wasn't it?
It was purely mathematical. He argued that giving Google's algorithm 10+ headlines to test with only 6 clicks a day was, and this is his quote, statistically irrational.
Okay, that makes sense. You're spreading the data too thin.
That's the mechanism. It's called statistical dilution. If you have, say, 15 different ad variations, but only 6 data points a day, The system can never figure out which one is the winner. It just keeps testing.
So you get stuck in what he called a perpetual learning phase.
That's it, exactly. You're just paying Google your $17 a day to run tests forever. You never actually get to the optimization part. You're funding their data collection instead of getting conversions.
By limiting it to 5, he was trying to force the algorithm to find a winner fast.
Force the budget toward what works immediately.
So that was the efficiency argument. But there was a second reason, maybe even more important.
Policy safety. It was all about minimizing the surface area. He wanted to give Google's policy bots as little text as possible to scan and potentially flag.
Get that clean initial approval and just survive.
Survive the gauntlet, get a few conversions, prove the concept, and stay under the radar.
Okay, so contrast that really careful math-based approach with the directive that came down from his reviewer, Richard Connor.
Right. Connor's position was just pure inflexible conformity.
The directive was just do it the standard way.
The standard way. Launch with a full build from day one. That meant 10 headlines, 10 callouts, and 3 structured snippets for each of those 3 sensitive campaigns.
And his justification for just ignoring Smith's analysis.
He basically pulled rank. He cited his many years working for some of the largest agencies and just fell back on the generic SOPs. It's a classic case of what you might call seniority bias.
He was applying a big agency, big budget mindset to this tiny high-risk account.
Completely. And to be fair, he was probably focused on Google's ad strength score.
Ah, right, the metric. The platform wants you to have a good or excellent score, and you get that by adding more assets.
It's the core of the trap. That ad strength score is a vanity metric in this situation. It's designed for a normal advertiser with a healthy budget. For them, sure, add more stuff. But for a client getting 6 clicks a day, chasing that score means you're sacrificing real-world efficiency and safety for a meaningless grade.
So the standard build gets forced through. Let's talk about the fallout. You mentioned statistical dilution. What does that actually look like in practice?
It just creates mathematical noise. When you force all those assets into a campaign that's getting almost no data, the algorithm is just lost. It's running tests that can never, ever reach statistical significance.
It's paralyzed. Too many choices, not enough information.
I mean, think about trying to figure out the best color to paint a room by putting one tiny dot of paint on the wall each day. You'd never see the full picture. The client's $1,500 is just, it's wasted on inconclusive tests.
So the campaign is just stuck, paying for Google to learn, but never actually learning anything.
And then the risk part gets amplified, like tenfold because of all that extra text.
Right, because Connor knew about the policy risk, but he had his own idea for how to solve it. And it involved AI.
This is where it gets really interesting, because it shows the limits of these AI tools when they aren't guided by a sound strategy. Connor used an AI assistant, like Microsoft Copilot.
And he prompted it to write safe copy, right? To avoid the trigger words.
Exactly. He asked for compliant copy. The source material even mentions him suggesting things like using the word keta instead of ketamine to get around the rules.
So the AI is great at that. It can generate 25 versions of a headline that sounds safe and are technically compliant.
It's brilliant at phrase compliance. It can sanitize a single sentence. But here's the paradox. While the AI solved the risk on a micro level, the manager's directive to build it out fully, that created a massive macro-level risk.
So the AI helps you write a safer sentence, but the SOP forces you to publish a whole book in a library that's constantly being scanned for banned books.
That's the perfect analogy. The robust build increased that surface area Smith was so worried about by like 10 times. You could have 9 perfectly safe AI-vetted headlines. But if that 10th one has one wrong word combo, the whole ad can get disapproved. Or worse.
So the volume is what kills you, not necessarily one specific word. The human expert saw the volume risk, but the AI, just following its prompt, actually made the total risk higher.
It's a classic case of solving the wrong problem. The AI delivered speed and volume, which we usually think of as good things. But here, speed and volume were the enemy. They just made the target bigger.
And there was another consequence Smith brought up too, the actual user experience on mobile.
Right, because something like 90% of the traffic was going to be on a phone. And when you have a crisis budget, every single click has to be perfectly optimized for a conversion.
So what happens when you cram all those extra assets onto a little phone screen?
2 things. 1, it's just cluttered and confusing. But 2, and this is critical, it physically pushes the main call to action, the thing you actually want people to do, further down the page.
The phone number, the book an appointment button. It's not visible anymore.
It's below the fold. The user has to scroll just to see the point of the ad. And if you're only getting 6 chances a day, you can't afford to make a user work for it. You need a straight line to the conversion.
So the best practice wasn't just wasting data, it was actively hurting the few chances for success they had.
It's just, It's hard to watch, isn't it? You see Smith with the math, with a deep contextual understanding of the risk, but the internal politics, the pressure to conform, forced him to launch a strategy that he knew was built to fail.
So what does this whole story tell us about business in general, beyond just Google Ads?
It connects right back to that whole compliance ecosystem.
Hmm.
I mean, a company like LegitScript exists because this stuff is incredibly complex. It's about blending, as they say, cutting-edge AI with expert human insight.
And the main lesson here is that those SOPs, those blind best practices, they're built for the average client, the one with a decent budget and all their certifications in place.
Absolutely. If the client has 100 grand a month and they're fully certified, yeah, go for the robust build. Max out that ad strength score. It makes sense.
But for this client, the micro-budget, high-risk client,
For them, following that checklist isn't a best practice. It's a liability, a profound one. You're trading actual account safety and efficiency for a meaningless score on a dashboard.
the principle seems so clear. Success in these specialized fields has to be about context. Smith's plan was based on the reality of $17 a day. Connor's was based on agency habit.
And in the end, we know from the documents that the internal power dynamic won. Smith, despite all his warnings, he followed the directive. He built the robust build with all the headlines and callouts, even though he knew he was setting the account up for failure.
So what does all this mean for you, for the listener who has to make these kinds of calls every day?
I think it means that in any field, your real value, your expertise, isn't just knowing the standard procedure. It's knowing when and why that procedure is going to break down against the reality of the situation. It's about questioning assumptions, even if they come from someone senior or from a generic score on a platform.
Which brings us back to that intersection of AI and risk. I mean, if a tool like Copilot can spit out 25 safe phrases in a minute, giving you all that speed and volume, but the sheer volume itself is what gets you flagged by the compliance crawlers,
Yeah.
then is speed and volume always the same thing as efficiency?
And that is the central dilemma. In these high-risk constrained environments, is the smart, lean, human-led strategy that Lance Smith proposed, is that still the superior, risk-aware approach? Or does this push for automated massive output end up destroying the very safety you're trying to create?
It's a choice between maximizing a platform score and maximizing your actual chance of survival. Something to think about in a world that always seems to be pushing us toward more, regardless of whether more is actually better.